For 25 years, he'd worked at the same record store, selling vinyl and giving music recommendations to customers. He never talked about his past, never mentioned why he knew so much about the industry from the inside, until artificial intelligence found his old albums and concert recordings. Welcome to AI Human Stories. Before we dive into this incredible tale of lost fame, musical passion, and how technology rediscovered a rock legend hiding in plain sight, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe some stories deserve an encore, hit that subscribe button. Vinyl Revival Records sat on Bleecker Street in New York's Greenwich Village, cramped, cluttered, stacked floor to ceiling with albums from every decade and genre imaginable. The kind of place where serious music lovers could spend hours digging through crates. Behind the counter every day for 25 years stood Danny Sullivan, 58 years old, graying ponytail, fingers stained with newsprint from handling album sleeves. He knew every record in the store, could recommend the perfect album for any mood, and had encyclopedic knowledge of music history. Danny's like a walking iTunes, customers would joke. But with actual taste and stories behind the recommendations, what made Danny special wasn't just his knowledge, it was his passion. When he talked about music, his whole face lit up. He'd pull out obscure albums, tell stories about recording sessions, explain the historical context of breakthrough records. Young musicians would come in seeking inspiration, and Danny would guide them through musical journeys they'd never imagined. He'd connect punk to blues, show how electronic music influenced rock, trace the evolution of entire genres. But there were things about Danny that didn't quite add up for anyone paying close attention. His knowledge of the music industry was too specific, too insider. He'd make casual references to recording studios, tour logistics, the business side of music that most fans never learned. Sometimes he'd start to say something about a particular album or artist, then catch himself and change the subject. And there was his guitar. In the back room of the store, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was a vintage Stratocaster that looked like it had seen serious stage time. When customers asked about it, Danny would just say, "Old hobby." The strangest thing was Danny's reaction to certain music. Most songs he could discuss analytically, professionally, but occasionally when certain late 80s rock came on the store stereo, Danny would go quiet. Not uncomfortable, exactly, but distant, like he was remembering something specific. Maya Rodriguez was a music journalism student at NYU who'd been shopping at Vinyl Revival for 2 years. She was working on her thesis about the commercialization of rock music in the 1980s when she started noticing Danny's unusual expertise. "Danny," she said one afternoon while browsing through 80s rock albums, "you know way too much about this era. It's like you were there." Danny looked up from pricing new inventory. "I was paying attention. Good music was good music. But it's more than that. You know, production details, studio gossip, industry politics. Yesterday you told me about contract disputes between bands and labels that I can't find documented anywhere." Danny shrugged. Music magazines used to cover that stuff more than they do now, but Maya wasn't convinced. She'd interviewed dozens of music industry professionals for her thesis, and Danny talked like someone who'd lived through the business, not just observed it. "Where did you learn so much about recording techniques?" Maya pressed. "You explained compression and reverb effects yesterday like you'd been in the studio when they were applied. Amazing what you can learn online these days." Maya laughed, but she kept watching. Danny had perfect pitch. He could identify keys and chord progressions instantly. He understood song structure like a composer. When young musicians asked for advice, his suggestions were sophisticated, technical, professional-level guidance. Most tellingly, Danny had strong opinions about authenticity in music. He'd get genuinely upset about manufactured bands, artists who didn't write their own material, the commercialization of what he called real rock and roll. "Music used to be about something," he told Maya once, "about saying something that mattered, not just making noise that sold records." It sounded like someone speaking from personal experience. NYU's music technology department had developed an AI system for analyzing vocal patterns in recorded music. The program could identify singers across different recordings, track stylistic evolution, even detect influences between artists. Professor James Chen was using the system to study how rock vocals had changed from the 1970s when Maya mentioned the record store clerk with uncanny musical knowledge. "Bring me a recording," Professor Chen suggested. "Even just him talking about music, the AI can analyze speech patterns, identify if someone has professional vocal training." Maya used her phone to record Danny during one of their conversations about album recommendations. Nothing secretive, just Danny explaining why Led Zeppelin 4 was structurally perfect and how it influenced later rock albums. When Professor Chen fed the recording into the AI system, the results were immediate and surprising. Danny's speech patterns showed characteristics associated with professional vocal training. His breathing techniques, resonance, even his casual speaking voice carried markers of someone who'd trained their voice as an instrument. But the AI went further. It compared Danny's vocal patterns to a database of recorded music from the 1980s rock era, cross-referencing not just commercial releases, but live recordings, bootlegs, demo tracks, anything available in digital archives. The system flagged multiple matches. Danny Sullivan's voice bore striking similarities to the lead singer of Midnight Thunder, a rock band that had 3 platinum albums between 1986 and 1989, before mysteriously breaking up at the height of their success. The AI identified vocal tics, pronunciation patterns, and tonal qualities that suggested Danny Sullivan and David "Storm" Sullivan, Midnight Thunder's frontman, were the same person. Maya couldn't believe the AI results. Midnight Thunder had been huge in the late 80s. Electric Dreams, Thunder Road, Midnight Rain, songs that defined arena rock for a generation. Their lead singer, Storm Sullivan, had been a legitimate rock star, but Storm Sullivan had vanished after the band's breakup in 1989. No solo career, no reunion tours, no tell-all autobiography. He'd simply disappeared from music entirely. Maya started researching. Storm Sullivan, born David Sullivan in 1965 in New Jersey. Midnight Thunder formed in 1984, signed to Atlantic Records in 1985. 3 albums, multiple hit singles, sold-out tours across America and Europe. Then nothing. The band announced an indefinite hiatus in November 1989, and Storm Sullivan was never seen in public again. But the timeline fit perfectly. Danny Sullivan had started working at Vinyl Revival in 1998, about 9 years after Midnight Thunder disappeared. The ages matched, the musical knowledge matched, even the physical appearance, accounting for 30 years of aging, seemed consistent. Maya compared photos of Storm Sullivan from 1989 to recent pictures she'd taken of Danny at the store. Different hair, different clothes, clearly older, but the facial structure was unmistakably similar. She ran the images through facial recognition software. 94% match probability. Danny Sullivan, the humble record store clerk who'd spent 25 years selling other people's music, was Storm Sullivan, one of the biggest rock stars of the 1980s. Maya agonized over what to do with her discovery. Danny clearly didn't want his past known, but this was potentially the biggest music story in decades. A rock legend had been hiding in plain sight for a quarter century. She decided on honesty. "Danny, I need to show you something," she said, arriving at the store with her laptop and a serious expression. She played the AI analysis results, the vocal pattern matches, the facial recognition comparisons, the timeline correlations between Storm Sullivan's disappearance and Danny Sullivan's appearance. Danny listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. "How long have you known?" he asked when she finished. "A few days." The AI flagged the vocal similarities when I played a recording of our conversation. Danny nodded slowly. AI's getting scary good at pattern recognition. Maya waited for denial, explanation, anger. Instead, Danny just looked tired. "Storm Sullivan," she said quietly. "Midnight Thunder. Electric Dreams was my favorite song in high school." "Mine too," Danny said with a rueful smile. "Still can't listen to it without getting nostalgic." "What happened? Why did you disappear?" Midnight Thunder was at the top of the charts. Danny was quiet for a long time. Around them, the store felt different, like a sanctuary where a rock god had been hiding from his own legend. "You want to know what killed rock and roll?" Danny asked finally. "It wasn't grunge or hip-hop, or changing tastes. It was the machine, the industry that turned music into a product, and musicians into brands." Danny's story emerged slowly. Midnight Thunder's success had been both a dream come true and a nightmare in disguise. "We started as kids from New Jersey who just wanted to play music," Danny explained. "Garage band stuff, writing songs about life, love, the usual subjects. When Atlantic signed us, we thought we'd made it. The first album's success exceeded everyone's expectations. Suddenly, Midnight Thunder went from playing local clubs to headlining arenas. Fame, money, everything young musicians dreamed about. But the machine takes over," Danny continued. "Suddenly you're not writing music anymore, you're writing products. The label wants another Electric Dreams. The manager wants songs that radio will play. The promoters want shows that sell tickets. The band's second album was more commercial, more polished, less authentic. It sold even better than the first. That's when I realized we weren't musicians anymore, we were performers in someone else's business plan.
The breaking point came during the recording of their third album. The label insisted on outside songwriters, professional producers, who would craft the Midnight Thunder sound more efficiently than the band could themselves. I was the lead singer of Midnight Thunder, but I wasn't allowed to write Midnight Thunder songs anymore. Some guy in a suit was telling me how to interpret lyrics I didn't write about experiences I'd never had. The third album went platinum, but Danny felt like he was performing karaoke versions of his own life. The final straw was when the label proposed a greatest hits album and a reunion tour. Greatest hits? We'd been together 5 years. But they wanted to package our legacy and sell it back to fans as nostalgia. That's when Storm Sullivan decided to die. I didn't plan to disappear forever, Danny continued. I just needed to get away from the machine, figure out who I was without the persona. Danny had used his real name and stayed in music, but on his own terms, working at record stores, supporting other people's musical journeys instead of being consumed by his own. The funny thing is, I love music more now than I ever did when I was famous. When you're Storm Sullivan, every song is compared to your hits. When you're Danny Sullivan, every song is just music. Working at Vinyl Revival had given Danny something he'd lost during his rock star years: genuine connection to music and the people who loved it. I get to turn kids onto bands they've never heard. I get to watch someone discover their new favorite album. I get to talk about music as art instead of as a business proposition. Maya understood. You found a way to stay in music without being consumed by the industry. Exactly. And for 25 years it's been perfect. I help musicians discover influences. I guide music lovers to new sounds. I preserve musical history by keeping these records in circulation. But don't you miss performing? The creative outlet. Danny smiled and gestured toward the back room. I still write songs, still play guitar, just not for stadiums full of people or record label executives. For me, which is how it started. Word of Danny's true identity spread carefully through the music community, not as gossip, but as recognition of someone whose influence had continued long after his public career ended. Musicians who discovered career-changing albums through Danny's recommendations came forward with stories. Music journalists who'd interviewed him over the years without realizing his identity wrote retrospective pieces about his insight and passion. The revelation brought opportunities Danny hadn't expected. Record labels wanted to reissue Midnight Thunder's catalog. Promoters offered lucrative reunion tour deals. Music documentarians wanted to tell his story. Danny turned them all down. "I'm not Storm Sullivan anymore," he told Maya. "I spent 25 years becoming Danny Sullivan, and I like who he is better." However, Danny did agree to one project. A local music school wanted him to teach a course on music history and industry awareness, sharing his unique perspective as someone who'd experienced both artistic success and commercial exploitation. "If I can help young musicians navigate the industry without losing their souls, maybe all this experience was worth something." The course became wildly popular, not because students were learning from a former rock star, but because Danny taught music as art, business as necessity, and authenticity as survival. "The music industry will try to turn you into a product," he told his students. "Your job is to remain human." Today, Danny Sullivan still works at Vinyl Revival Records 6 days a week. The store now attracts music pilgrims who come hoping to meet the legend behind the counter, but Danny treats them exactly the same as every other customer. The AI system that discovered Danny's identity has been refined and implemented by music historians studying the evolution of popular music. His case highlighted how many influential artists might be living quietly among us, their contributions continuing in different forms. Danny's story changed how we think about artistic legacy. Professor Chen noted, "Success isn't just about commercial achievement or public recognition. Sometimes it's about finding sustainable ways to remain connected to your art." Danny has written a book, Behind the Counter: Music, Fame, and Finding Your Way Back. It's not a tell-all memoir about rock star excess. It's a meditation on authenticity, artistic integrity, and the difference between being famous and being fulfilled. But the work that matters most to Danny still happens at Vinyl Revival, where he continues connecting people with music that might change their lives. "Every day someone walks in here looking for something," Danny reflects. "Maybe it's a specific album, maybe it's a new sound, maybe it's just connection to something real. I get to be part of that discovery." The artificial intelligence that uncovered Danny's secret had been designed to analyze vocal patterns in music, but it discovered something more important: how artistic authenticity can survive commercial corruption, how influence can continue without fame, and how sometimes the most important music happens in the quiet spaces between the spotlight. Storm Sullivan sang to stadiums. Danny Sullivan whispers to souls. Both are necessary, both are valuable, and both are part of the same story. The rock star who became a record store clerk represents something important about how we define success and measure artistic impact. Danny's story shows us that artificial intelligence isn't just about solving mysteries or exposing secrets. Sometimes it's about recognizing patterns of influence that continue long after the obvious markers of success have faded. And sometimes the most important music isn't the songs that top the charts. It's the quiet guidance that helps someone discover their next favorite band, the recommendation that changes someone's taste, the conversation that reminds someone why they fell in love with music in the first place. Because legends aren't defined by how loudly they perform, they're defined by how deeply they connect. So here's what I want to know. Have you ever met someone whose knowledge seemed too deep, whose passion seemed too informed for their apparent background? Someone who might have had a bigger story than they were telling? Share their stories in the comments below. Tell us about the mentors, guides, and quiet influences who shaped your love of music, art, or any other passion. And if this story struck a chord with you, subscribe to AI Human Stories, because in a world where artificial intelligence can identify hidden patterns in voices and lives, the most important discoveries aren't about technology. They're about recognizing that influence and artistry take many forms, and sometimes the greatest musicians are the ones who've learned to make music with their lives instead of just their instruments. Until next time, remember, fame fades but passion plays forever, and the best music often happens when nobody's watching.